So it's kind of hard to talk about Hey Arnold the movie without talking about how exactly it came to be. For one thing, this was originally not supposed to be released in theaters. Yeah, if I knew this before because I'd seen a bit about it in Nickelodeon magazine a long time ago, but this was originally supposed to be a TV movie spun off from Hey Arnold entitled Arnold Saves the Neighborhood. Hey Arnold the Jungle movie, which came years and years and years later, was supposed to be the theatrically released Hey Arnold movie. However, because that wasn't ready, due to the way that Craig Bartlett had been doing the show at the time, the Nickelodeon needed to film in the theaters, so they reanimated this one apparently and put it in the theater instead. This movie gets not the best reception, and frankly, if you ask me, I can kind of understand, but I still think it's a bum rap. Here's the plot. Arnold finds out that a land developer by the name of Shek, played by Paul Sorvino, has convinced the mayor to allow him to tear down the entire neighborhood where Arnold lives in order to, between 33rd and 39th Street, in order to be able to build a giant Super Ball there with his name on it. Arnold and the others, not wanting to lose their homes, make attempts to try and convince the mayor to not go through with the deal, but they find any attempt they make is nowhere near enough or foiled behind the scenes. However, soon Arnold learns from his grandfather that during the right before the American Revolution or during it, a famous event called the Tomato Incident, in which the colonists fought against the British for a tomato tax, ended up taking place in their neighborhood, and thus the whole neighborhood should be declared an historic landmark for that reason. Arnold and his best friend Gerald Johansson begin searching for the document, only to discover through the help of a mysterious shadowy character by the name of Deep Voice. Insert other All the President's Men reference here. That Shek is stolen the document, has bought the document, and is trying to conceal it in order to be able to go through with the plan. Arnold and Gerald also somehow get help from keep running into Helga G. Pataki, Arnold's rival and his love interest, and they seek help from other kooky characters, such as overworked office manager Mr. Bailey, voiced by the late Vincent Schiavelli, a spy named Bridget, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, and a friendly coroner who's well versed in history, played by Christopher Lloyd. Can Arnold and Gerald also convince a disillusioned bus driver, voiced by series creator Craig Bartlett, to help them out and be successful in saving the neighborhood? So I guess a complaint that people could have about this movie is maybe compared to the show, it's too outlandish, which I can kind of understand that. I mean, granted, I'm not going to talk about the Jungle movie now, but without saying too much, I can say that while that movie also kind of goes to the outlandish direction that this movie does too, at the same time, the setting supports it more, I suppose. At the same time, I'd say that compared to something like Doug's first movie, this feels a lot bigger in scope than that film did, and thus I feel it justifies itself to be released in theaters for that reason. That said, though, and also, I'd say that because it's 75 minutes, it doesn't overstay its welcome for that reason as well. Now, if anything, I'd say that what this movie has going for it is, it's not overly complicated. It's very easy for a child to follow. It's very easy for a child to understand. And there is some crazy funny bits in it, too. I mean, a kid could appreciate the fact that this does still kind of support the tone of Hey Arnold, even though it is trying to be its own thing, too. And it doesn't quite fit with the show, but at the same time, it still doesn't feel so far removed from the show either, as I think some people see it. Not to mention, I think the bits with Helga trying to resolve in her mind whether or not she should help Arnold or just let the deal go through because her dad's going to get a lot of money out of it too because he's going to be getting a new beeper emporium. So, yeah, it's this movie has a lot to balance in it, and I think it balances it quite well for what it is. Now, that said, I think that the movie does, and with only 75 minutes, like I said, I think it helps bring things along quite quickly. Now, where I think it's at a disadvantage is that I suppose they maybe don't have so much of an emotional impact because they're trying to just focus on the outlandish aspects of the plot, try to just focus on the concept of the plot itself. Paul Sorvino, he does a good job with the voice impression, and Shek has an interesting motivation, but he's not that interesting a character himself either. I mean, granted, he feels like the appropriate villain for a story like this, but at the same time, the story itself is not that impressive either. So therefore, the fact that the villain fits it doesn't seem that big of a criticism to give the film. And I remember as a kid, I was legitimately on the edge of my seat. I loved the race against time aspect of the film, where like you saw how much time there was, and there was a lot of time as the movie started. I mean, granted, when you get the countdown clock for the first time, it's about a month before the demolition happens. And then eventually, when Arnold and Gerald set off to find the document, there's 46 hours. There's about 46 hours left in their time. So you do get that. You're reminded of how much time, how much of a they are on the clock about this, and the more time ticks away, you realize just how crazy that things will get as the movie goes forward. Is it the much like Clockstoppers? It's nowhere near the best of the Nickelodeon movies, and I can completely understand if you don't get into it, and if you feel it's too simple, if you feel it's too childish, and you feel it doesn't quite hit the same notes as the show because it doesn't have as much thought put into it as the show. But for what it is, a fun little diversive exercise, I'd say it's not something that's worth overlooking entirely.